What's going on, guys? Danny here from Metal Couch, and we're starting to wind down from 12 Days of Christmas, 10th day in. I honestly thought that I wouldn't be able to finish this series because of my busy work schedule, but we must keep on, and wow, do we have an album to talk about today. Today we're going to be talking about Master Control, the final album from the band Liege. Again, this was an album that was recommended to me by a friend of the show, Vince, and I can see why. This is an album that is right up my alley. I'm a big fan of stuff like Judas Priest, Painkiller, speed metal in general. Not necessarily thrash, but, speed metal, some good old-fashioned 80s speed metal is just really good every once in a while. Painkiller is 1990, but we'll squeeze it in there to the 80s. Wow. This is an album that I'm surprised does not have the attention of more people. I believe it was earlier this year I reviewed an album by Riot entitled Thundersteel. And I compared that album to Painkiller, and I still feel that that's a fair comparison. It is on par with that album. Master Control is a masterful piece of work. And let's just break it down. I want to talk about the production first. This is an album that is so 80s. I love it. I love the sound of this album. I have no complaints about the production of this. The drums sound fucking fantastic, and their drummer knows how to play, and it's really, really good. Guitar-wise, that's an Ibanez Tube Screamer. That's a Tube Screamer if I've ever heard one. It is an awesome tone. I love it when album tone. I mean, granted, it may not be the most unique sound in the world, but it's such a good sound to have on an album. I love that distortion pedal to death, and I'm glad that it's present on this album. Vocal-wise, it's a relatively standard 80s speed metal affair. Their vocalist really, I wouldn't say has too distinct of a style, but it does fit with the overall tone of the album. Breaking the album down, you have Fear itself, which, yes, does quote FDR, who's, well, I'll just not talk about my opinions on FDR, but rather standard affair, nothing really too special to open up the album, which I was surprised with. For a speed metal album, I was expecting something to knock my socks off, but you really don't get that until Eye of the Storm, the second track, which the opening riff is completely, totally not plagiarizing Master of Puppets at all. I mean, I could easily see myself playing Doom to this track, but seriously, it's not plagiarizing off of Master of Puppets at all. Nope, definitely not. Other than that, really good track. I mean, not to say that that's, I mean, if you're gonna if you want to imitate or copy a riff, I mean, you might as well go for what many people consider to be one of the best metal albums ever. But I actually talked to a friend of the show, Vince, about this, because when I started listening to this album, I told him that there's a specific set of riffs in Eye of the Storm present in the opening and during the chorus, and I'm like, that's the opening to Master of Puppets, the second riff, not the first, the iconic opening riff. And he's just, whatever, man, I don't care, I'm going to bed. And then we get into the title track, Master Control, and, again, it's a rather standard affair, but there's just something about it that just sounds really good. And it leads into something I didn't expect when listening to this album, a completely masterful cover of Rainbow's Kill the King, which in my opinion, this track is a fair tribute to the late, great Ronnie James Dio. It's awesome. An awesome, awesome cover. I loved it. It was, their own little spin on it was just great. And then we have Soldier's Fortune to clear out the first half of the album, which, yeah, okay, sure. Then we get Feel the Blade. Feel the Blade is rather slow until you get the probably probably the best guitar solos on the album. Like, if you want to have an example of what this band's solo work is like, look no further than Feel the Blade. And then we start getting into the last part of the album with Broken Wasteland, Rapture, Suspicion, and then Fallout. Broken Wasteland's good. Rapture is okay. Suspicion is very fucking good. I didn't expect it, because with a track like Suspicion, I'm thinking, oh man, there's more filler. And Rapture was... But Suspicion, arguably pretty good. And then Fallout. Fallout is a great way to close this album. A very strong finishing track. And I have nothing else really to say about this album other than I want to buy it. A physical copy. And I want to keep it at my desk at all times. This is a great example of speed metal, and it's a shame that this was the last album that this band put out. Granted, I didn't listen to their past discography before this, but I rather enjoyed Master Control. Also, that artwork is just 80s as all hell. I mean, I love 80s speed metal, and this just appeals to everything that I love about the era. This, and I don't really hand out ratings like this often, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a 10 out of 10. It does have faults, it does have filler tracks, but when this album is good, it is a masterpiece of speed metal. If I were to give this album a grade out of 10, I would give it a 9.5. It is strong. I highly recommend listening to this album. I listened to it through Spotify. I was surprised that it was on there. When it comes to actual releases, I think, if I may consult my records here, let's see other versions here. The last one was put out in 2012, but I haven't been able to find a version of that was put out in 2012. There was one in 98 that was put out through Metal Blade, and then 88 had both Metal Blade and Roadrunner, strangely enough. Both put it out on the same day in 1988. So, who knows? And both of that was on vinyl, so it didn't see CD release until 10 years after the album came out, which I gotta find a copy of this. I have to own this album. It's a 9.5 out of 10 for me. For the love of all things speed, listen to this album. It's gonna blow your mind. Danny here from Metal Couch, signing out.